Can Mir KO Cro Cop? Will Bader overcome Nogueira? And Miller hunts for the Gracie Hunter at Dream. This is the Fight Network's preview of UFC 119 and Dream 16.
Don't worry about it, Cro Cop. I'm not training that hard.
Welcome, fight fans. I'm John Pollock, and today we're looking at a stacked weekend of fights from both sides of the world as the UFC enters Indianapolis, Indiana at the Conseco Fieldhouse, while the Dream organization presents their 16th installment from Nagoya, Japan. John Ramdeen is going to be riding shotgun as we break down each of the cards. UFC 119 is going to be highlighted by some exciting main card bouts, including a lightweight contest with Sherk trying to stave off the rising young talent Evan Dunham. Ryan Bader faces the toughest opponent of his career in Rogerio Nogueira, and the main event will feature a heavyweight contest with two stalwarts from the division. One is a former heavyweight champion, and the other was victorious in the toughest tournament in mixed martial arts history.
The main event Saturday night pits 13-5 Frank Mir against 27-7-2 Croatian Mirko Cro Cop. At 31 years of age, Mir is a former UFC heavyweight champion and is hoping to get back into the title mix following his disappointing loss to Shane Carwin at UFC 111 this past March. For Cro Cop, he presented a different aspect of his game in his victory over Pat Barry at UFC 115, where Cro Cop claimed submission of the night honors with a rear naked choke.
I think Frank Mir is going to eventually get the fight to the ground, and I think he'll submit him.
It was a card that should have featured a rematch between Frank Mir and Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira. However, an injury put the mighty Minotauro on the shelf. With several of the UFC's heavyweight division's top stars booked in upcoming matchups, only one name seemed big enough to fit next to Mir on the marquee. K1 and Pride FC superstar Mirko Cro Cop was chosen as the substitute. Though Cro Cop agreed to the bout, the Croatian seemed unmotivated in headlining the UFC card. In recent years, Cro Cop has fallen from the upper echelons of the heavyweight division and has directed his attention to other interests. But due to his recent comments, the former UFC heavyweight champion Frank Mir may have lit a much necessary fire under the Croatian sensation. Not one who is known for trading barbs, Cro Cop responded with a promise, and if it does hold true, we may see shades of a man who was once considered the most feared striker in all of mixed martial arts. Never one to shy away from the mic, the quick-witted Mir countered with his own threat. Though Mir is coming off a first-round knockout loss to Shane Carwin, he has remained relevant in the division.
Since my Ultimate Fighter days, I've been a big fan of Frank Mir. He was my coach. I definitely think see him coming back, especially from his really bad loss against Carwin. I see him coming back bigger and stronger and better, and I think he's gonna win that fight.
A win over the former Pride Openweight Grand Prix champion would certainly look good on his resume. It is a matchup of styles, but mixed martial arts in 2010 has progressed to the point where more often than not, the most well-rounded fighter comes out on top.
Então, nessa o Frank Mir leva. O Frank Mir leva, acho que leva fácil essa luta. Eu acho que, na verdade, o Cro Cop só tem aquele chute, né? Acabou o chute e não tem mais nada, né? Torço, lógico, sou do Muay Thai também, mas pensando como vale tudo, o Frank Mir tem mais chances do que ele.
Mir, if he gets it on the ground, it's going to be tough for Cro Cop. You know, obviously Cro Cop is a threat on the feet, you know, but we've seen, you know, Gabriel Gonzaga knock him out, you know, with a head kick. It's just like he hasn't been able to make that full transfer from the Pride to the UFC. But I think Mir's going to, you know, come off that fight and he's going to get him down on the ground. It's going to be it.
Mir has proven himself to be the more well-rounded fighter in this scenario. While all signs are pointing to Frank Mir, he still cannot discount the puncher's chance, or in this case, the head kicker's chance. After all, it would be foolish to overlook the man who was quoted for describing his kicks as right leg hospital, left leg cemetery.
Ladies and gentlemen, John Ramdian is here to break down UFC 119, and let's look at the main event. Mirko Cro Cop heading into this one already stating he didn't feel he would be 100%, and then this eye injury he incurred during training. Seems that he will be cleared though to fight, and do you expect that this to play a factor into the fight with the eye injury?
I think if you talk to most fighters, they'll all say the same thing. Nobody is 100% going into their fights. Training is just so grueling and so physically demanding that nobody, especially at this level, goes into a fight 100%, and it's just, you come to expect that.
Frank Mir, this was a heavyweight bout, but we didn't really know where he was going to be going with his career. At one time, he was bulking up to match Lesnar, then toyed with the idea of going down to 205 and then realizing he just cannot make that weight. For Frank Mir, this is a very pivotal fight, I think, in his career, coming off that Carwin loss.
Yeah, I think it's pivotal for both guys. I think Frank Mir, he's already talked the smack, so he has to back it up in this fight. And I think Frank Mir has what it takes to beat Mirko Cro Cop if he uses the right strategy and uses the right tools. And for this fight, if he can bully Mirko Cro Cop, which we've seen in the past, Cro Cop doesn't like guys that move forward, and if Frank Mir can use that strategy, I think he can get a victory. But Mirko Cro Cop's still hungry, and he's still dangerous if this fight stays standing.
And we saw that against Pat Barry. I mean, he was taking a lot of leg kicks in that first round, but then was able to pick apart Barry in rounds 2 and 3, and even submitting him in the third round.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to submit Frank Mir, though.
Probably not.
I think for this fight, for Mirko Cro Cop, is to move forward, try to get Frank Mir to engage him standing, try to take out his legs, and use his world-class anti-grappling skills that we've seen in his time with Pride. So if he can use that strategy, there should be no reason why he can't take out Frank Mir. But the size should be a difference. Frank Mir, a big guy, you said before, trying to get up as big as Brock Lesnar, and obviously having a difficult time to go down to 205, where I think Mirko Cro Cop, if he was disciplined, I don't think he'd have any problem going down to 205 pounds.
So do we see more of the same of Mirko Cro Cop? He's on a 2-fight win streak going into this fight. Does he make it 3, or does Frank Mir get back into the title hunt?
I think it's a very, very close fight, but I think Mirko Cro Cop, if he uses the strategy of moving forward, I think he can win a decision in this fight.
In light heavyweight action Saturday night, 19-3 Antonio Rogerio Nogueira will look for his third victory inside the UFC when he squares off with Ultimate Fighter Season 8 winner Ryan Bader, who, like Nogueira, has an unblemished record inside the octagon and stands at 11-0 thus far in his professional career. Nogueira squeaked past Jason Brills at UFC 114 with a narrow split decision victory, while Bader is coming off of the first stoppage of his UFC campaign when he stopped Keith Jardine at UFC 110 in Australia this past February.
That's going to be interesting, actually. That's Ryan Bader's big fight. You know, I mean, this is the one that's gonna make his career, and if he wins that fight, he's gonna be a contender for sure, and a chance at a title run. So, he's a great fighter, but little Nog is amazing. You know, I mean, he's well-rounded, great striking. We'll see what the wrestling game is. Can he submit Ryan Bader off his back is going to be the question, and I really don't see that happening.
Com certeza, Rogerio Nogueira, né? Vamos que vamos. Olha, ele tem boxe muito bom, ele tá vindo de nocaute bastante, né, o Nogueira. Então acho que ele vai continuar com essa linha dele.
I think that Bader is going to use his wrestling, and he's going to use his power with his hands, and I think he's going to probably finish the fight.
John, a lot of people are pointing back to Little Nogueira's last performance against Jason Brills, and I think this is going to be a similar test for him against a more accomplished wrestler in Ryan Bader.
Yeah, for Nogueira, what you have to look at in that fight with Jason Brills is he was training to fight Forrest Griffin. And if you look at Forrest Griffin's style, there's no need to go down to the ground or try to practice wrestling. He was ready for a stand-up war, which is the fight that Forrest Griffin always brings to his opponent. So I think he was a little caught off guard by Jason Brills' wrestling and his submission skills in this fight. There's going to be no doubt about this fight. For Ryan Bader, his skill is wrestling, and the question mark will come down to submission defense. Ryan Bader has the skills to take Nogueira down to the ground, but does he have the skills to avoid the submission game or the jiu-jitsu game that Nogueira possesses off of his back? And standing, Bader has the power. We saw it. He knocked out Keith Jardine. But when it comes to technical stand-up skills in boxing, Nogueira uses his jab effectively to set up his hands. So I think Nogueira wants to keep this fight standing and try to take out Bader. But again, we've seen the power that Bader has.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think Bader, we did see that power against Keith Jardine, but that was a fight that I thought Ryan Bader was losing until that knockout at the end, and I think it's his best bet. Get Nogueira on his back and be able to avoid any submissions, because that is Bader's foundation.
I agree, and we've seen wrestling is the strongest base in all of mixed martial arts right now. So if he can put the Brazilian on his back, keep his hands in tight and ride it a 3-round decision, I think he can get the victory. But he's facing a guy that went the distance with Shogun and is absolutely destructive. And if he's on his A game, he now knows that everybody's tough and you can't take anybody lightly. And I think Nogueira will get to see his hands, and I think he'll really take it to Ryan Bader in this fight.
So you're going with Nogueira. Let's get specific, and how?
I think Ryan Bader's a tough guy. He's 11-0 for a reason, and I don't think Nogueira is going to be able to put him away. I think this fight will be contested in the stand-up department, and I think Nogueira will win a decision.
In what promises to be an entertaining 170-pound battle, former welterweight champion Matt Serra, with a record of 11-6, will meet Indianapolis' own Chris "Lights Out" Lytle, who enters the cage with a record of 29-17-5. Serra is looking to build upon his knockout of Frank Trigg earlier this year at UFC 109 as his striking continues to improve, and there is no one better to test gloves with than the former boxer in Lytle, who has gone 2-0 thus far in 2010, and both have been submission victories.
John, Matt Serra is going to embark on something he has not done since 2004, and that is have 2 fights in 1 year. An interesting little stat we found here at the Fight Network. And as Matt Serra gets later into his career, we're seeing some hands on this guy, as Frank Trigg can attest to.
And that's what it comes down to. For Matt Serra, he has to put the pressure on Chris Lytle for this fight and try to use his hands, but he's facing a guy that has awesome boxing. Chris Lytle, very durable. He uses his hands. Go back and look at his fight with Robbie Lawler. He knows what it takes, and he has the skills to mix it up with anybody, whereas Matt Serra really has that one-punch knockout power. So expect Matt Serra to keep moving forward, trying to land that big shot on Chris Lytle. I think the jiu-jitsu, both guys very well versed in the ground game. I think it's going to neutralize, each guy will neutralize the other. Matt Serra hasn't gotten a submission off of his back in close to a decade, and for Chris Lytle, I just don't see him catching Matt Serra in anything. I think both guys are going to stand and trade, and I think in the end, it will almost be the same as the first fight. I expect Matt Serra to win a split decision in this fight, the same as the other fight.
2 generations of lightweight fighters will meet at UFC 119 as the 37-year-old Sean Sherk, the man that once stood on top of the 155-pound mountain, meets the talk of the lightweight division, 28-year-old Evan Dunham, who is batting 1,000 in MMA with a record of 11-0. Sherk has not fought since May of 2009 when he dropped the decision to current lightweight champion Frank Edgar. Dunham already holds a win over Efrain Escudero and Tyson Griffin in 2010.
Evan is pretty much a good all-around fighter. I mean, he's a good wrestler. You know, he's a very good jiu-jitsu guy, and he's a good striker. So you can't just focus on any one area. We have to look at this as a true mixed martial arts fight. So he's working a lot of stand-up, specifically with southpaws, and working with a lot of those guys. The wrestlers that are coming in are all coming in with the right foot forward, just to get used to that feel. All the holders, everything we're planning on is for a southpaw. And again, Sean's style is just to grind, and go. And he's been able to do it for 3 rounds, 4 rounds, 5 rounds. So he's going to continue on. He's in really good shape. He's feeling healthy. So it's going to be a great fight.
John, Saturday night we have the wrestler Chael Sonnen, Sean Sherk, in action against Evan Dunham in a lightweight contest. Sean Sherk, we haven't seen him in action for over a year since that fight with Frank Edgar. And Sherk seems to have this decision that I'm going to stand with guys rather than using his wrestling skill. Are we going to see him revert back to the wrestling?
I think so. I think Sean Sherk, I had a chance to go to Minnesota to talk to Sherk, and he's just criticized no matter where he takes this fight. If he takes it down to the ground, people say he wrestles too much, and now that he keeps it standing, people say that he stands and trades too much. So for this fight, though, I'm sure Sean Sherk is going to go back and use his roots, the wrestling game, to try to take Evan Dunham down to the ground. Sean Sherk's never been submitted, so it's going to be very difficult for Evan Dunham to catch him in anything. And I think if Kenny Florian didn't catch him, I don't think that Evan Dunham's going to be able to. I think Sherk's going to hold him on the ground, use his ground and pound, and get the decision victory. But if Dunham keeps this fight standing and uses his range, I think he could beat the Muscle Shark. But Sherk's just a little too experienced. Look at the guys he's lost to: BJ Penn, George St. Pierre, Matt Hughes, Frankie Edgar. Enough said.
With Evan Dunham on paper, this does, to me, size up a lot like the Tyson Griffin fight, where I completely was blown away by Dunham in that performance, and he was not able to, fall prey to Tyson's wrestling in that fight. I think Sean Sherk taking a year off at 37, that's really old in MMA right now, and I think taking that year off, I think you are going to see some cage rust, despite what some may say.
Very true, but Sean Sherk is such a consummate athlete, and he's very experienced, and that time off may be good, especially for a guy that's 37 years old. He's now healed up from any nagging injuries, and he wants to get in there and mix it up, because I know he wants to get back into that title hunt, and he knows if he takes out a guy like Evan Dunham, I'm sure a title shot will be just around the corner.
I agree. I think huge implications for the winner of this one. Who's it going to be and how?
I'm going to say it is going to be the Muscle Shark, and I think he's going to win by decision.
Rounding out the main card is another lightweight bout as Ultimate Fighter 2 alumni Melvin Guillard, who holds a record of 25-8-2, steps into the octagon with the 17-5 Jeremy Stephens. It was following Guillard's win over Waylon Lowe at UFC 114 in May that Guillard issued a challenge to Little Heathen, and matchmaker Joe Silva responded. Stephens may have had the best performance of his career this past May at UFC 113, controlling Sam Stout and earning the unanimous decision win at the Bell Center in Montreal, Quebec.
John, Melvin Guillard and Jeremy Stephens, two heavy hitters, someone I feel is going to sleep in this fight.
Absolute fireworks. Fight of the night written all over this. Melvin Guillard has crazy knockout power. He's very explosive, super athletic. But Jeremy Stephens, this is a guy not a lot of people know, but one thing you have to know about Jeremy Stephens, he's very intelligent. Go back and look at his fight with Sam Stout. He did exactly what he needed to win that fight, and I think he's going to use the same type of game plan for Melvin Guillard. It's going to be very hard to hold this guy down because of his explosive athleticism, but Jeremy Stephens, I think he'll find a way, and I think he will get the victory by decision in this fight.
In undercard action this Saturday night, Tough 7 finalist C.B. Dollaway will look for his third straight victory as the 10-2 Arizona native meets Canadian Joe Dirksen, who will embark on his 59th professional fight. Dirksen last fought for the UFC this past May in Montreal at UFC 113, where he was the lone Canadian on the card to have his arm raised, dispatching filthy Tom Lawler with a rear naked choke. In a heavyweight bout, the 2-0 Duke Rufus trained Matt Mitrione, who banished Kimbo Slice from the organization in his last bout at UFC 113, will hope to keep his undefeated record intact as he meets the executioner Joey Beltran, who enters this fight with a record of 12-3 and last fought on the same 113 card, earning the decision over Tim Hague. In a lightweight bout, 14-3-1 Thiago Tavares steps in for the injured Aaron Riley to take on Pat Audenwood, who's making his UFC debut with a record of 9-0-1. Audenwood is a member of Team Bomb Squad and most recently fought for the M1 organization in April and goes by the nickname of Awesomely Awesome, which you pretty much have to be when you call yourself that. In another 155-pound fight, 12-2 Steve Lopez hopes to recover from a disappointing octagon debut at UFC 103 in September of last year when he dislocated his shoulder in the second round of his fight with Jim Miller and the bout was halted. Lopez will get that chance when he steps back into the octagon and meets 8-3 Waylon Lowe. The NCAA Division II wrestler has previously fought for Hook and Shoot, Bellator, and King of the Cage before making his UFC debut in May in a losing effort to Melvin Guillard. In welterweight action, 15-4 Canadian TJ Grant walks into his fifth UFC bout with a .500 record and most recently dropping a close decision to Johnny Hendricks at UFC 113. Grant meets 17-3 Julio Paulino, who made his octagon debut in March, dropping a unanimous decision to Mike Pierce. And finally, in a fight that many people were scratching their heads over when it was announced, former K1 and Pride fighter Mark Hunt, with an MMA record of 5-6, will step into the UFC octagon for the first time in his career and his first fight since May of 2009 as he takes on undefeated Sean McCorkle, who holds a record of 9-0. The Freak Show is not expected to last long, and you can expect Hunt's UFC career to last just about as long as James Toney's did. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we're going to be previewing Dream 16, which takes place this weekend from Nagoya, Japan.